Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by the Dude Ranchers Association and produced by Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. Cowboy storytelling has always been one of our favorite topics on the podcast. Steve Clauson, new to our podcast team, interviews Russell about what it was like growing up on a dude ranch and the adventures had over the years in the saddle and on the range.
Good day, everyone. My name is Stephen Clauson, and I have been absolutely blessed to get to know Russell True and the folks at White Stallion Ranch over the last 2.5 years. During that time, I've gotten to know his wife, Laura, his daughter, Reagan, his brother, Michael, and other members of his immediate and extended family. Something I learned early on is Russell is a treasure chest of stories. There has never been a time that we've met together that he hasn't had an absolutely relatable story that's compelled me to want to know more. In fact, in my opinion, he's what makes a good storyteller. I have wondered why more people didn't know these stories, and early on, I told him, you should write a book. And it turns out he's written 3 books. I didn't know that. He keeps some of these things secret. If you've met Russell, you kind of know that. Well, when I suggested having someone do a podcast and interview the podcaster Russell, he was a little resistant. I stayed on him, and today on the Cowboy Up Podcast, I get to do just that. Now, you're going to have to give me a little bit of a break. I am filling 2 enormous pair of boots, taking on the role of Russell and Alan, and that is not entry-level stuff. Now, the questions I'm going to ask Russell have not been given to Russell. This is the first time he hears these questions. I promise this was not his first choice because he really wanted to know what they were. And I said, no. And some of these questions came directly from the guests of White Stallion. I feel like I was with him on so many of these stories, and I love it. Without delay, let's get going. Okay, Russell, how are you?
I'm good. You?
Good. I think that introduction was pretty accurate, don't you?
No, not really.
Well, I do. And as long as one of us is reasonable, that's great. Okay? So I'm going to hop right into it. And like I said, I've got so much ground to cover, I don't even know that we're going to get through it in one podcast. You know, White Stallion Ranch is about the only place you've ever lived since you moved here from Denver. Is that true?
Yes.
And you're what? Just a little younger, a little older than 5 when you moved here?
Yeah. Our parents bought the ranch in September of '65. I was 5. There wasn't a house for us to live in, so by the time the house was built and we moved down, I was 6.
Okay.
March of '66.
Okay, and how old was Michael when you got here?
He was 3 months old when we moved in here.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So he wasn't much help around the dude ranch.
No, a little bit of a hindrance.
Okay, but it was worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
So what was the area like when you first got here?
Area meaning the area that surrounds us?
Yeah, the area surrounds you.
Well, we were in the Marana School District, which is the largest school district in the U.S., 550 square miles, and we're in the Avra Valley, which is west of the Tucson Mountains, which separate Avra Valley from the Tucson Valley. And when we moved into this area, the Avra Valley, there were cotton fields, agriculture, some ranches, and very few rural homes. So I went to school with farmers, ranchers, and migrant workers. And it was interesting because all of them they cared a lot about their education. And then in the 70s, the mobile home developments came and it exploded in what is today now called Wildcat subdivisions, which are south of us and not really, either in sight or in any real way impacting us. But it definitely happened. And I always remember we'd cross Rattlesnake Pass and come into Avra Valley, and our parents would bemoan if we were driving across at dark how many new lights there were out here. That was terrible.
That's funny. Well, so was this area, would you describe it as desolate and remote at the time, or?
Well, I would never, we came here because my mother agreed to come because she loved the views and loved the mountains, Safford and Panther Peaks. We always thought it was beautiful. I mean, it's desert, course, as you know, it's the wettest desert in the world. It almost isn't one. So I never think of it as desolate, but it was pretty isolated. Nearest gasoline for our cars was about 25 minutes away. Nearest grocery store similar. That same location is now 35 minutes away because we went from 0 stoplights between us and them to I don't know how many. So there wasn't anything nearby, but we weren't like some ranches an hour and a half from food.
Okay. So when you moved here, I mean, I know your father had deep experience in running a dude ranch, right?
Yeah, zero
experience. So this had to be absolutely overwhelming in their life. They've got a 6-year-old son and they've got a 3-month-old son, and they're trying to cobble their world together.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard as a 6-year-old to really have any real memory or appreciation for what that meant, other than I know that they worked tirelessly. I mean, I've always said, and I mean it, that I think they worked so hard that it shortened both their lives. And they just did everything. I mean, they for many, many years said there was never a guest who checked out that they didn't collect their bill. They never were, other than to do an errand, never off the ranch for the 7 months that we were open at that time. We were raised by what they never used the word nanny once. They had babysitters, and babysitters took care of us. And then when the season ended, end of April, they were home and we ate as a family. And October 1st, dude ranching resumed, and we were back with the babysitters, and they were back doing dude ranch stuff.
Okay, and you know, the genesis of that question was there was a family here that I spent some time with from Windsor, Ontario. And the last 3 days he was here, he was talking about how he was going to bed one night at about 10:30, and he was walking around the ranch and he saw you. And that morning he'd been walking around the ranch around 5:30 in the morning, and he saw you as well. And he specifically commented on that. He says, I have no idea where this man gets this energy.
Well, that might have been a bad day. I mean, at 10:30 I was still out and around. Typical day, Laura opens a corral. If I do, it could be 5:30, it could be 7. And usually I get home between 8:30 and 9:30 at night. That's kind of the 10:30 would have been a little late.
So that's only about a 14-hour day.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think about it in hours. I think about it as, well, we got that much done today. There were years where I was working on 5 hours sleep, and that was hard. I literally fell asleep on phone calls and standing up, and so it's a lot better now. Whatever number of hours a day is just fine.
You don't really focus on it, do you?
I actually never think about it. And never ever.
And you focus more on guest care and guest support than just about anything.
Well, I mean, we, in our little business beside White Stallion, Jay Wells, my partner in that, and we have a philosophy that sprung from White Stallion, which is the ranch is the boss. And so I don't mean this in any diminishing sense of anybody, whether it's staff, me, or the guests. It's the ranch is the boss. And if we're doing what's good for the ranch, that means we're taking care of our guests, we're taking care of our staff, we're taking care of ourselves, and I guess the word in today would be we're looking at it holistically. As long as the ranch is the primary motivator, we're going to make everything else work right.
Perfect. Now, did your learning how to dude ranch, did they just, your mom and dad, did they do this on their own? Did they bring in people to help them? What is that? How did they handle that? Do you recall, or did you hear stories?
No, I don't really. No, I don't really recall. I think that they did a lot of things very well, and they were smart people, and they had the work ethic. And I quote all the time my friend Ken Neal, who told me when my boys were young and he knew us really well and we'd stay at his ranch. He says, well, Russell, teach your boys a work ethic, your job's done. And I always tell that I thought that was extremely simplistic at the time, and I look back on it and I think, yeah, Ken was right on that. They had the work ethic. I think that I believe quite strongly now that they as I did early on and my brother did early on, I don't know if he'd agree, we were not as good at running a hotel and a restaurant, because we do that, as we could have been. And we held ourselves back and limited ourselves because we, like so many dude ranchers, felt like if, we're there, we're charming. I'm talking about my parents now. and things are happening like they're supposed to. We've got it. We're a dude ranch. Well, we're also a hotel and a restaurant. And it took us a long time to learn a lot of things that I think we now know.
Now, how many acres was White Stallion when you arrived at the age 6? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. Our parents bought 200 acres. It was the original 160-acre Desert Land Act homestead. That you could homestead in this area of the country 160 acres. And that was homesteaded officially in 36 by David Young. And then somewhere along the line, and I think it was the owners prior to us, bought an additional 40, and that's where our main big cookout area is now. So they bought 200 acres. They were 17 rooms, 17 horses. A lot of the room we're in, the building we're in is new, and a lot of the ranch is new, and a lot of it's old. And I've had the compliment over the years. There aren't that many people that have seen us a long time ago and then had a big interruption and seen us more modern times. And the compliment I've gotten multiple times, not that many, because how many people could say that? They say everything has changed and nothing. And they say there's everything has changed and yet everything is still the same. And I think that's the ultimate compliment, because we sit and agonize on not ever impacting the core central experience, just making that experience better.
Excellent. Now, I know when your parents took the ranch over, that's 50 plus years ago, almost 60 years ago. And how did they do repeat reservations, for goodness sakes? Because I don't think they were doing a lot of email back then.
Yeah, so, they did what dude ranchers did, and I probably Holiday Inn back in 65. Yeah, we'll start our 59th season year. We're fiscal year, May 1st.
May 1st, yeah.
So that'll be our 59th, and of course the succeeding will be our 60th and 80 years of dude ranching here. His paper, pen. I remember when my dad brought the first calculator home from a trip he'd gone on to Japan. And, but prior to that, it was an adding machine, and you know what an adding machine is. So they did. And, everything was paper, pencil. They developed these big reservation charts, which were 2-foot sheets of cardboard stock paper, and they had them, and they wrote it, they had a little system, and it was all backed up by paper and pen, and, nobody really used credit cards. It was all checks. All the correspondence was my mother typed on her manual script font Royal typewriter. She never touched a computer, never used an electric typewriter. She banged away on that old typewriter until that part of the job moved to other people.
Wow. Remarkable. They basically, they do what you tell me now that you do. You're a dude rancher. You just figure it out.
Well, I think more so for them. I mean, they had no background in hospitality. They accepted hospitality, and a lot of times a lot of their stories, they were oil lease brokers and traveled. My dad said he bought a new car every year because he put 100,000 miles a year on it, and they were based in Denver, traveled all around Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, and they ended up in a lot of small towns and in some pretty not up to today's standards by any means, motels and hotels where they had to go down the hallway to the bathroom, and bed bugs were an issue. So they'd experienced some bad hospitality, but they also knew what good hospitality was, and they knew, like, the Brown Palace in Denver, and they knew what it was, but they'd never provided it. My dad was a wrangler at 12 years old in Glacier Park, and for one summer. He was a maid the next year for one summer in Glacier Park. And so this was as foreign as foreign could be when they stepped in. They were smart people. There were a lot of other dude ranches around Tucson still. There were probably about 24 total. And some of the folks were helpful and friendly, and they chatted and shared experiences and thoughts, and others were less friendly and less helpful.
Less helpful. If you recall, what was your first actual job here on the ranch?
First job I was paid for was, we had 4 lawns here at the ranch. We have 0 lawns now, and so I used to mow the lawns. That was my first job.
And I'm thinking that was a push rotary mower. I'm not thinking you had a power mower.
It was a push rotary briefly, and there was a lot of lawn, and I was a little guy, and it didn't go that well. And then you had to rake up the grass, so we did get a power mower, but it was still one you pushed. I mean, it wasn't even self-propelled. You pushed it around, but at least it had a bag to empty.
Okay. Now, at what age did you get your very own horse? This was your horse, not one you shared with people.
Well, so it kind of evolved. Alan and I share one common. Alan Day, his first horse was Chico. I guess it was the family's first horse. All the kids started out on Chico. My first horse that I rode with some regularity was a dude horse named Chico. And we had a little paint, probably Welsh pony cross named Comanche, and he was probably a little 13-2 hand horse, and he could outwalk any of the big horses, and so I didn't do anything but trail ride and do some other few lessons and stuff when Harold and Cindy, our first head wranglers, were here, and Cindy was always very helpful, and Harold sort of looked down his nose at me because it's funny, we ended up doing business together and we're good friends for a long time. But I didn't. He didn't think I was worthy of going out and roping cows and doing that stuff. So when he moved on, Ed Overmeyer came out, and Ed was a lunatic and just a super charismatic lunatic, and he was just up for everything. And so when he came, I was 12 years old, and I got to start roping, and I shouldn't have been, because it was a dangerous place, really, and we were doing crazy stuff. But I roped on a little Comanche, and we had some Brahma cattle because we couldn't afford nice horn cattle, and they were taller than Comanche, and it was. So I got to start roping at 12, and Comanche ended up mine. He sort of morphed from trail horse to my horse, and then my next horse was Pal, and it just, because I'm 5.5 years older than Michael, as I sort of grew out of a horse, then Michael would follow up. Now Michael ended up, of course, in the state finals at 8 roping, and he got a shot at it a lot earlier because I'd already cut that trail, and really after Ed left, Clyde Davis was really the guy who. He was safe and smart and knew what he was doing. And best friends with Ed, and I still look back at Ed fondly, but Clyde was the guy who he taught us. We've got a plaque on the grill that said, Clyde taught us a lot, but most importantly, he taught us we could do anything. And
you got that on the barbecue out there.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've always meant to ask you about that.
And he was just that guy, and he looked like a Marlboro man. Thought he looked like a Marlboro man. Because he was right, but he could do anything, and he made you believe you could too.
Well, let me back up. You said Michael was in the state finals at the age of 8.
Yeah, I mean it was kids rodeo, but he was in state finals at 8 years old.
That's pretty remarkable.
Well, I mean it is and it isn't. It is because it came really quickly for him. He was really good at it and good quickly, but somebody had to be in the kids finals, and I mean rodeo is one of these things you don't start very often at 30 years old. You don't start at 18 years old. And if you're going to be a NFL star, you probably better be playing some football when you're in your youth.
5 or 6 years old, certainly. Now, how did your responsibilities grow here at the ranch over the years? Now, and I preface that question because I look at everything you do now, and none of what you do is entry level. I know you went to school. You got a bachelor's degree from University of Arizona, which a lot of people don't know, and you did quite well in school. I don't know if your brother went to school or not.
Yep.
But did he go to the University of Arizona as well?
Yes.
Okay. And as you ramped up, I mean, you went from cutting the lawn to, probably eventually you were running the corral, and you were probably not 40 years old when you started running the corral.
No, I wasn't. And we're going to take a quick break, and because I've got the time clock in front of me, we've gone over, and then we'll come back with the answer to that.
Thank you, Stephen and Russell. And of course, as I have always said, Russell has just all kinds of stories, and some of them may not be real, but you know what? They're all true, true stories. And sometimes the best kind of program is just to let him tell his stories. And thank you, Stephen. Glad to have you on the program. Hey, this is coming to you from two people. First of all, from the White Stallion Ranch. This is where this program initiates, where it's broadcast from. And when you make your scheduled trip, and hopefully you have scheduled a trip, to Tucson, and in particular to the White Stallion Ranch, one of the premier guest dude ranch experiences in the country. Not only a place of recreation and adventure, it's a historical place. And for you and your family, this would be a perfect time. Yeah, it's going to get kind of warm in Tucson, but we are still open, and we have some wonderful facilities for you. And so why don't you reach out to whitestallion.com. That's whitestallion.com. And see if there is a place for you, and I'm pretty sure there is. And perhaps if you want to go a little bit north, whitestallion.com will help you find, perhaps through the True Ranch Connection, maybe an up north place for you for this Dude Ranch cowboy experience that you're looking forward to. So there we go, whitestallion.com. And my name is Stan, and I have the privilege and the pleasure to help produce and put this program together. And that's a part of what we call the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. And right now we are in the business of helping you have your own podcast, and particularly if it has a Western cowboy horse, traditional Western theme, books, songs, stories, services. We'd be glad to help you put on your very own program. In fact, we call it Perhaps You Should Have a Yours, your own radio station. That's right. Many businesses and many organizations are now finding that they can have their own radio station and reach people all over the world. We know how to do that, and we can help you do it. We can get you on the radio. Reach out to me at Stan at Wit Radio. That's Wit, W-I-T Radio, Stan at witradio.net. And this could be the year for you.
By 20 with easily.
Okay. Stan, this is a restart of part 2. Stephen Clauson interviews Russell Drew.
You know, Russell, urban sprawl has forever altered the Dude Ranch layout in Tucson, Arizona, and the nation in general. What drove your parents and now you to remain true to these values?
Well, I mean, so it's two different answers. I can't state enough for our parents, and I know Michael, my brother, would join me in this, that they had the foresight. Now, this wasn't Nostradamus stuff, but they saw that Tucson was growing. It was all over. It was unmistakably going to happen. But they bought the ranch because they felt it had the most potential. They liked it the most. So those two things merged. even though it was the most rundown, least well known of the bunch that they could have bought. 4 different ones were available, but they sacrificed their own lifestyle. It's not like they lived impoverished eating dog food, but they certainly sacrificed a lot of lifestyle so that they could buy up the land and take 200 and turn it into 3,000 acres. And they realized if they didn't do it, we wouldn't be here, and we would be along with the other 22 dude ranches that were here when we came. They're gone. Some of them are physically completely gone, replaced by homes or roads or whatever. So that's their answer. They had the foresight and the willingness to sacrifice. In our case, we were given a great opportunity, and we recognize it. We value it more than some people because we watched our parents sacrifice and work so hard to keep it. Particularly me, because I'm older, I watched the decline in dude ranching, and I watched urban sprawl take its place. It's still happening. It happened across the hill at Lazy K. Still makes me sick when I cross the hill. I have to look away, literally. So our job is different. Our job is to work hard, keep the ranch the boss, and keep it what it is, and keep the opportunity that we were given viable.
It's a very emotional thing for you, and it's very clear. I prefaced when we started today that you've written 3 books, and
I've written 2 that are published.
Okay,
I've got another one in process.
Okay, another one is
so people don't go, what's the?
Okay, good enough. But you talk about, the book that you've written on dude ranches in Arizona is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Is that your favorite?
Oh, yeah, it is. It's one of the stupidest uses of my time ever, and one of the most enjoyable. I wish I had time. I'd do all the states that are dude range states, which aren't that many, of course. But Arizona, it was so much fun. I'm disappointed because it's a photo book, right? So if you don't have a photo, you can't tell the story of the ranch. If there's not a photo, there's no caption. It's basically photos with captions. And so it was so much fun to revisit those ranches that I knew so well. I knew the owners. I knew I grew up with some of the families, and, Lazy K across the hill, Wild Horse. It was sort of the preeminent Tucson ranch in the early days when we were here. Learned the Tanque Verde history better because they have amazing history. And then I found a few ranches I'd never even heard of. And so that was like finding gold in the hills. So it was a bit of a pilgrimage for me. I really enjoyed it. I think dude ranches, this little micro segment of hospitality that we are, I think we're really, as small as we are, we're bigger than people expect. And so when you delve into the history and the role that dude ranching had in the making and the shaping of the West, I enjoy all that. So I enjoyed the Wyoming book very much too, because I got to learn more about Larry Laram, our first DRA president. And I'm honored. I got to be president of DRA a couple of times, and I get to share the wall with Larry Laram and the Eatons, the original Dude Ranch, and we're friends with those folks. And Bill Ferguson was on the pod. I love all that, but that Arizona book was special.
It's a great book. And when you talk about you got to know some of the people in the Dude Ranch Association, I'm just going to say it. Russell was inducted into the Dude Ranch Hall of Fame in January, something he doesn't go out of his way to talk about, but I'm going to. Sorry if that embarrasses you, Russell.
No, that doesn't embarrass me. I said something about it to my wife, and I said, and she said, well, it may not be that big a deal to you, but it sure would be a big deal if they didn't include you. And I thought,
there is that.
As always, Laura's wisdom is right on.
There is that. And Laura doesn't really hold back on stuff like that, does she?
No.
Good for her.
No.
Okay. Your parents raised a family at White Stallion, and now you're doing the same with Reagan.
Right.
What are some of the biggest challenges and greatest opportunities that come with that? Because it's got to be double-sided coin there.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the challenges are. I mean, with the boys, when they were young, I guess the preeminent challenge was occasional, very rare occasional guest interaction. Occasionally, they didn't care for the fact that I disciplined my kids, and also sometimes the kids are kids, and the interactions with my kids and theirs sometimes disturbed them. Yeah, I mean, I have more fingers on one hand than instances, but that was probably the only challenge. I think it's such a great opportunity. They meet such interesting, great people from all over the world. My son he had friends that were Swiss, didn't speak one word of English. He didn't speak whatever, I think they spoke Swiss German, because, Switzerland has multiple languages. But they didn't know one word, and they were friends for 2 years until the Swiss kids learned some English. And later on in life, Stephen went over and visited with them and enjoyed an incredible trip. So, they have a sense of the world that that people that don't leave the country wouldn't have, and a sense of the country. I mean, they understand New York better than. So it's a great opportunity, and I interview Dude Ranch kids for scholarships for our Dude Ranch Foundation, which is really my big deal charity. They do such great work, the Dude Ranch Foundation. But these guest ranch kids get an exposure that's unequal. Where else would you get it? You could have a resort where people come from all over the world like our guests, but they're not going to have the same interaction. You're not going to, people will go to restaurants whenever they go or wherever they go. This is a destination. They're here. I think the challenge with Reagan is she's not going to school. We homeschool her, and so the constant unexpected disruptions are the challenge to do her right that way. So she does some other stuff, educational enrichment in town, but carving out the time to do that well is the challenge. Otherwise, this is golden for her. That kid can talk to anybody about anything, anytime, anywhere, and that part of that's her. Let's face it, but also the interaction.
Well, she's entirely engaging and intelligent for a 10-year-old, and that's pretty good when she's only 6.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're about out of time for today. We're coming up against our limit, and there's so much I haven't had time to talk about that I know people want to learn about. Russell, would you be open to talking further about the White Stallion Hollywood connection and the history of White Stallion? Would you be willing to go deeper on that at a later date?
Yeah, no, anytime. I talked to some folks that have written a movie and trying to get it placed, and they were looking to me for advice, and I had to painfully tell them I didn't really have anything valuable to contribute. But I can talk about our history. We've got an interesting history, and
you have a fascinating history. What are you talking about?
I've lived a fair amount of it. So anything from professional wrestler commercials to feature films and George Clooney, and yeah, we've kind of run a unusual gamut of productions.
Russell, I genuinely appreciate you taking the time, because I know that's something that's one of the non-renewable resources that you have, and we don't want to waste that. So thank you very much, and enjoy yourself, and we'll talk to everybody next time. Enjoy yourselves. Saddle up.
Thank you.
Okay, horse lovers and others, thanks for being with us. Hats off to Stan Houston's production team. Meet Stephen Clauson on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Give a like, give a share. Next week, we step back into history for a look at the monumental life of Buffalo Bill, a Western galloping gourmet. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall, ride safe, and enjoy one of our favorite tunes, Don't Say Goodbye to the Cowboy Way by Jim Jones.
Storm rolled in from the western sky. 2,000 head of steers took flight. Good night paid those boys to ride, and by damn they would some might die. Don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years and going strong today. So don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. She's 10 years old on a stout bay horse. 300 years they guide her course from the Spanish quest to the blue and gray, to what we call the cowboy way. Don't say goodbye, don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. To the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years and going strong today. So don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Rawhide and steel, hooves and horns, legacy to the yet unborn. A code that comes from a hard-lived life. Your destiny when you're born to ride. Don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Tradition lives, and it's here to stay. 100 years and going strong today. So don't say goodbye to the cowboy way. Don't say goodbye, don't say goodbye to the cowboy